Hi everyone, it's Natalie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the books that I read in May and June. Finally, June! Some June reads. I know I've already posted a partial June wrap-up because I posted the box office-a-thon wrap-up video, but there's still plenty of June books to talk about, so let's get started. The first book I'm going to be talking about is The Roommate Risk by Talia Hibbert. This is a romance in which we follow these two best friends who the woman, her apartment, I think, floods, or at least her bedroom floods with water, so she can no longer stay there. And her best friend offers her to stay in his spare bedroom, and so they start hanging out a lot because they're living together. And of course, it's the romance that develops between these two best friends. So I rated this 3 stars. It's definitely not my favorite Talia Hibbert. It just didn't quite hit the mark as I wanted it to. I think personally I was just a bit irritated with the relationship between these two characters. I think that potentially the issue I have with best friends to lovers is when I can see both perspectives. Because when I can see just how much of an idiot each character is being when it comes to their best friend, I just get annoyed. I'm like, can y'all please talk? Have a conversation, work this out. Like, there's really no need for it to be so much of a fuss to have a clear conversation about how you feel about each other. But whatever. Apart from that, one of the major things in this story is that the woman, Jasmine, really has commitment issues. Because her mother abandoned her as a child, if I'm not mistaken, she's really scared that if she allows herself to be emotionally attached to someone romantically, they're going to walk away. And so she decides to just have flings and stuff like that. And that's why she's also so terrified of her feelings for her best friend. But by the end of the novel, I didn't feel like that was resolved. Like, I could see how Talia Hibbert tried to move her forward, but it didn't feel satisfying, I guess, would be the thing. Regardless though, the smut scenes in here were peak content. I'm just convinced Talia Hibbert doesn't know how to write a bad smut scene, because I don't think I read a single novel by her where I wasn't into the smut. Maybe one, maybe a novella, and I can't even remember it, because honestly, whenever I think of Talia Hibbert, all of them are a success, at least on that front. Like, if anything else, they're a success in that front. So, am I upset I read this? Absolutely not. I will never regret picking up a Talia Hibbert. I just wish I had loved it more than I did, but there really were good bits in there. Like, there really were some really cute scenes in there that I really enjoyed. I just wish I had enjoyed the entirety of the novel, I guess. The next book I'm going to be talking about is Go by Kazuki Kaneshiro. I'm going to be reading the summary of this because it's a kind of literary novella, which means it's impossible for me to summarize in any way that will make any fucking sense. So let me just read this. As a Korean student in a Japanese high school, Sugihara has had to defend himself against all kinds of bullies, but nothing could have prepared him for the heartache he feels when he falls hopelessly in love with a Japanese girl named Sakurai. Immersed in their shared love for classic music and foreign movies, the two gradually grow closer and closer. One night, after being hit by personal tragedy, Sugihara reveals to Sakurai that he is not Japanese, as his name might indicate. Torn between a chance at self-discovery that he's ready to seize and the prejudices of others that he can't control, Sugihara must decide who he wants to be and where he wants to go next. Will Sakurai be able to confront her own bias and accompany him on his journey? So I'm not entirely sure how to rate this. It was a lot. Basically, because it's such a literary novella, it has a lot going on, and I could see the good parts of it and the not so good parts. So let's start with kind of what I appreciated about it. What I appreciated about it is that it definitely tackles this feeling of not belonging, because that's really the crux of what's going on in this novella. Our protagonist doesn't feel tied to Korea, but he also doesn't feel like he belongs in Japan. And so he's in this in-between space where people tell him that essentially he belongs in Korea, but he doesn't feel that. But he also doesn't feel welcome in Japan as a true citizen and as someone who should be respected and accepted there. And so that, I think, was the best part of this novella. I really, really, really enjoyed that. But what made it more complicated for me is that basically on the cover of the book, it's like labeled essentially as a coming of age story, which I definitely agree with. But then the protagonist in the book itself calls this a love story, and it's really not a love story. The romance is very lackluster, very surface level. It's very hard to care about it. And in some ways, some aspects of it even made me uncomfortable. It was a very strange romance between these two characters. I just couldn't really get it or get into it. And so I just felt like that was a strange choice. And then I'm going to chalk this up to the translation. I wasn't fully convinced by the prose. I really liked the dialogue. I thought the dialogue was pretty fucking hilarious. But then the prose, the descriptions and stuff like that felt very dry and just very different from how our main character talked with other people. So I was left like frustrated as I was reading. I was kind of like, some bits were enjoyable to read, some bits weren't. I wasn't quite sure what to make of that. And then I think even though I went into this book with zero expectations, it just went in completely different directions, I guess, from where I thought it was going to be, which just made it all the more confusing because I really had no idea what I was getting into. I started this novella with zero clue what it was about. I just knew I had gotten the ebook for free on like World Book Day, I think, a few years back, and I knew nothing. I just was wanting to try something different, but somehow there was like a lot of violence in this book that I wasn't anticipating. There was a lot of the protagonist's father beating him. I think his mother beats him at one point, and there's just a lot of fighting, the protagonist fighting other kids his age, and it was just a lot, and I was just like, whoa. So basically, because of all of that, I have no idea what to rate this. I rate it as an experience. It was an experience that I would recommend because I really do think there's a lot of good stuff in it. It's just an unexpected ride, let's call it that. The next book I'm going to be talking about is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. This is a book essentially about, I guess, interdimensional travel. It's this futuristic world in which humans have discovered how to travel between dimensions, but the trick is that in order for you to survive this travel into a different alternate universe, you need to have died in that alternate universe. And so in this book we follow this woman who has consistently died in a lot of alternate universes, and so she is valued for her ability to be able to travel to these other universes and essentially gather data about them, because essentially the original Earth or universe gathers information about how these other alternate universes are doing in order to make better decisions in their planet. So essentially we follow her as the threat of her job starts being at risk. She's potentially going to lose her job because essentially she'll be retired for like a better system, equipment, whatever. I can't remember exactly, but it's something like that. I feel like I've described this book very poorly. So I rated this 4.5 stars. This book was really fucking good. It was just good. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did. I was hoping to, because I'm like black author, sapphic energy, sci-fi, multiverse. I'm like, all of this sounds fucking amazing. I hope I like it. And I really, really did. First of all, the writing in this does not feel like a debut, okay? this feels like an experienced author. The world building was really, really strong. I felt like I understood the world perfectly almost from the beginning. I feel like information was dropped in a way that made sense and wasn't overwhelming. And then in general, I just liked the world. I liked how it was dystopian but also very realistic. I could imagine this happening basically, and that kind of ties with why I enjoyed this. The characters were all very realistic. One of my favorite things is that the antagonists of this book weren't made into caricatures. You could really understand their reasoning. You could understand exactly why they made every single choice that they made, and you were like, yeah, that makes fucking sense. If I were a bad guy, I would do that shit too. Like, why the hell wouldn't I? So I absolutely adored that. It has been such a long time since I've read a book with really strong antagonists. Like, a lot of antagonists in books are just weak. They're either caricatures or they try to give them like a sad sob story background. And it's like, just treat your villain or your antagonist as a person and it will actually work out. So love that about this book. And then Kara and Del, their slow burn romance was life-giving. Life-giving. If anything, because I'm such a sucker for romance, I could have easily had 100 more pages of this book with more focus on the two of them, and I would have been absolutely obsessed. I would have been so happy. I would have enjoyed it 100%. I just know it. But from what we got, I still adored their relationship. It was complex. The two of them didn't always agree. They didn't always see eye to eye. They weren't always the best to each other, but it was so clear that they had such intense feelings for one another, and that's just fucking amazing in my eyes. It just is. It's just incredible. Also, similarly to the novella I just talked about, Go, this book also tackles this idea of belonging, of wanting to belong somewhere and trying so hard to belong there, but not being sure if you'll ever succeed or what exactly does it take to actually succeed. So I love that. And I also liked it because it translated into Kara's romantic relationships and relationships with others. She desperately wants to be loved. She desperately wants to feel like people care deeply about her, and that's one of the reasons why she, even in multiple universes, keeps falling into this very toxic, abusive relationship, because she wants the strong feelings even if they're negative. So just fucking amazing. And then the plot twists in this book, magnifique. Like, literally there were so many twists that made sense but that I wasn't anticipating. Like, so many of them were just caught me by surprise, but then when I thought about them, I was like, that makes so much fucking sense. I love it. I'm obsessed. I can't wait for, I think there's gonna be a sequel or at least a book in the same universe, and I'm just like, Micaiah Johnson, yes, give it to me. I love it. I'm obsessed. I need more. The last book I'm going to be talking about is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is an Arthurian Legends reimagining in which we follow this black girl whose mother has recently died in very mysterious circumstances, and she decides she wants to investigate to learn what really happened, if there's anything behind this death that truly isn't ordinary as she suspects. And so she ends up going to, I think it's a type of like summer program at this prestigious university where her mom used to study, and she joins this secret society that is like the round table of the Arthurian legends. And so there she starts learning essentially about magic and about the not so great things that the secret society does. and how that might be connected to her mother's death. So I rated this 4.5 stars. Yet another amazing book. Like, just such quality content, really. Honestly, I did not think, actually, let's put it like this. I was scared to hope that I would love this as much as I did, because YA fantasy can be very hit or miss. Even though I love the fantasy genre, truly YA, you never really fully know what you're getting, but this one was so fucking good. And I think it's because it was so well crafted. One, you really wanted to keep reading. It perfectly paced plot points and moments of tension so that you really just wanted to consume this book in a rush. It took me a while to read it, but it was because I was buddy reading it with two booktubers. I will link them down below, and we had to slow down for reasons, but we all quite enjoyed this fantasy. And for me also, the biggest surprise was that the character I hated the most ended up becoming one of my favorite characters in the book, because Sel was a pain in my ass in the beginning of the book, and by the end of the book I adored him. I loved his sense of humor. I stan. I basically stan. And then ironically, I really loved another character, Nick, in the beginning, and then I slowly started disliking him. I don't fully dislike him yet. I'm not committed to that life yet, but mostly because I am committed to the Sel, Nick, and Bree life. I'm like, give me the OT3. I'm ready. Give it to me. My main complaint about this book though, and the main reason why it got 4.5 stars instead of 5 stars, is because there were too many characters. There were too many side characters, and they were poorly developed. I understood why this was this way, because it's about the Round Table. There's a lot of lineages essentially, and a lot of people, and science, and pages, and a bunch of shit. It was just overwhelming. And it was hard to keep track of who the fuck was who. So that was the biggest weakness. And then there was also a kind of like villainy monologue towards the end of the book that I wasn't super in love with. But otherwise, this was really good. And I'm looking forward to seeing where Tracy Deonn takes this series, because she essentially planted the seed in this book that part of what's toxic about this Arthurian secret society is that they leech power. They use too much magic, while other magic users who are not part of the secret society, essentially, it's more about balance. It's more about asking your ancestors for help, and they grant you some help, but then there's essentially a recovery period, and you can't be asking them for this type of help all the time. So I'm really looking forward to more conversations about this, about balance and what is too much and too toxic. And essentially, I still really hope, I really hope that the conclusion of this series will be that Bree completely dismantles the secret society. That's what I dream of, that's what I hope for, but I will have to wait and see to find out what the author decides to do. So yeah, that's it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you would like to follow me on any of my social media, I will have the links to that down below in the description. But for now, see you next time.